I'm 76 years old, and I need to tell you something that's taken me a lifetime to understand. Right now, as I sit here in my beachfront condo looking out at the ocean, I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. I built a company from nothing and sold it for $200 million. I had everything the world tells you to want: the corner office, the private jet, the mansion, the magazine covers. People called me a visionary, a success story. Young entrepreneurs asked for my advice like I had all the answers. But here's the truth nobody knew. While I was busy building that empire, brick by brick, deal by deal, I was simultaneously destroying the only things that actually gave life meaning. And the cruelest part? I didn't even realize what I was doing until it was far too late to fix it. By the time I understood, my daughter was grown, my wife was gone, and I'd become exactly what I'd always feared: a rich man with nobody to share it with. My name is David, and this is the story of how I won everything and lost what mattered most. If you're grinding away right now, telling yourself that success is just around the corner, that you'll have time for family once you hit that next milestone, I need you to hear this, because I was you 30 years ago, and I was catastrophically wrong about almost everything. Let me take you back to 1978. I was 30 years old, newly married to Sarah, with nothing but ambition and a business plan that everyone said would fail. We lived in a tiny apartment where you could hear the neighbors through the walls. Sarah worked as a teacher, while I poured every waking hour into getting my business off the ground. I was trying to build something in commercial real estate development, a field I barely understood but was determined to conquer. Those first 5 years nearly killed me. I'm talking 80, 90, sometimes 100-hour weeks. I'd leave before Sarah woke up and come home after she'd gone to bed. I missed dinners, anniversaries, weekends, but Sarah never complained, at least not at first. She'd say things like, "We're building our future together," or "This sacrifice will be worth it." And God help me, I believed her. More than that, I made it my mantra. I genuinely convinced myself that once we made it, once we achieved that undefined level of success, everything would magically get better. We'd have all the time in the world then. We'd take trips, have long dinners, reconnect. That magical then became my North Star. Looking back now, I can see it was the first lie in a long chain of lies I told myself for the next 2 decades. In 1983, Sarah got pregnant with our daughter Emma. I remember being excited but also terrified because I knew what it meant: more responsibility, more pressure to succeed, more reasons to work harder. The day Sarah went into labor, I was in the middle of closing a deal that would make or break the company. I stayed for the meeting. I told myself I had to, that we needed this, that Sarah would understand. By the time I got to the hospital, Emma had already been born. I'd missed it, the birth of my only child. Sarah's face when I walked in, I can still see it. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me, holding our newborn daughter, and I saw something in her eyes that I didn't want to acknowledge. Disappointment, maybe, or the first crack in her belief that I'd eventually show up when it mattered. I made promises after that, swore I'd be there for the important moments. But you know what happened? I created this hierarchy in my mind where I decided which moments were important enough to show up for. And somehow, work always won. I missed Emma's first steps because I was at a conference in Chicago. Missed her first day of kindergarten because I was negotiating a contract. Missed her 6th birthday party because there was a crisis at the office that, in retrospect, wasn't a crisis at all. There's one memory that haunts me more than any other. Emma was 7 years old. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was working in my home office because I was always working. She came in with this drawing she'd made a picture of our family. She'd spent hours on it, used every crayon in the box. She was so proud, so excited to show me. Her little face was glowing. But I was on a conference call, an important one, or so I thought. I held up one finger, that universal just-a-minute gesture. She stood there, clutching her drawing, waiting. Maybe 30 seconds passed, maybe a minute. Then she walked away, shoulders slumped. I told myself I'd look at it later. I told myself she understood. I never did look at it that day. Years later, after everything fell apart, I was packing up the house and found that drawing in a box of Emma's old things. She'd written at the bottom in her careful 7-year-old handwriting, "I love you, Daddy, even though you're always busy." 7 years old, and she'd already learned that work came first, that she was an interruption. By the time I found that drawing, she was 23, and we were basically strangers. But back then, I was too blind to see what I was doing. The company was growing. By 1995, we were worth $50 million. We moved into a 10,000 square foot house with an ocean view. I thought this was it, proof that all the sacrifice had been worth it. We even took a vacation to Hawaii, our first real vacation in over a decade. I remember thinking, see, it all worked out. Except it hadn't. During that vacation, I noticed Sarah had become someone I barely knew. She'd built an entire life that didn't include me. She had friends I'd never met, hobbies she'd developed alone, charity work she was passionate about. We'd been married for 17 years, but we were living parallel lives that rarely intersected. And Emma, who was 13 by then, barely spoke to me. When I tried to talk to her, I got one-word answers. When I asked about school or her friends, she'd say, "Fine," and go back to her room. I'd become a stranger in my own home, the guy who paid for everything but wasn't really part of the family. I told myself it was normal teenage behavior, that we'd reconnect once she got older. There was that word again, once. Always pushing the real connection to some future moment that never quite arrived. The company kept growing. By 2000, we were approaching $100 million in value. I was working harder than ever, traveling constantly, networking, making deals. I was addicted to it, though I would never have admitted it then. The rush of closing a deal, the ego boost of being recognized as successful, the validation of seeing my name in business magazines, it fed something in me that my family apparently couldn't. In 2001, we dropped Emma off at Stanford. She was 18 and brilliant and accomplished. She'd done all that despite me, not because of me. The day we left her at college, she hugged Sarah for what seemed like forever. They were both crying, saying how much they'd miss each other, making plans for phone calls and visits. Then Emma turned to me. She gave me a brief hug, maybe 5 seconds long, polite, mechanical, like I was a distant relative she barely knew. "Thanks, Dad," she said, and that was it. I drove home telling myself it was fine, that this was normal, that we'd have plenty of time to build our relationship once she graduated and started her career. I was still waiting for once. 3 months later, Sarah asked for a divorce. We were sitting at dinner, a rare dinner, where I'd actually come home at a reasonable hour and she just said it. I want a divorce. 23 years of marriage. And she was done. I asked her why. She looked at me with these tired eyes and said, "David, I've been alone in this marriage for 20 years. You're married to your company, not to me. I'm 62 years old, and I want to spend whatever time I have left actually living, not waiting for you to finally show up." I couldn't even argue with her. Every word was true. She'd been waiting for me to choose her, and I never did. I always chose work, every single time. The divorce was finalized in 2002. Sarah got the house, which seemed fair since she was the only one who'd ever really lived in it. I moved into a downtown condo and did what I'd always done when life got hard. I threw myself into work even harder. The company grew to $200 million. I made the cover of Forbes. Speaking requests poured in. People wanted to know my secrets, how I'd built such a successful enterprise. I gave talks about perseverance, strategic thinking, calculated risk-taking. I never told them the real secret. I'd succeeded in business by failing at everything else. I'd built a fortune by bankrupting my relationships. In 2009, I had a heart attack. I was 61 years old, working late in my office on a Friday night, when my chest started hurting. I drove myself to the hospital because there was nobody to call. Sarah had remarried a retired teacher who actually showed up for her. Emma was living in New York, building her own career. My assistant found out about my heart attack the next day, when I didn't show up for a Monday morning meeting. Lying in that hospital bed, hooked up to machines, watching nurses come and go, I had this moment of absolutely crushing clarity. What had it all been for? I'd built this massive company, accumulated all this wealth, achieved everything I'd set out to achieve. But for what? For whom? Not for Sarah, she was gone, happier without me. Not for Emma, she'd learned to live without me long ago. For myself? For my ego? For some imaginary scoreboard that nobody else was keeping? For the first time in my life, I had nothing to distract me from the truth, and the truth was devastating. I'd spent 40 years climbing a ladder only to discover it was leaning against the wrong building the whole time. I sold the company in 2012, The payout was enormous, more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, and then I had to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. I was 64 years old, wealthy beyond measure, and completely alone. I tried to reconnect with Emma, started calling her every week, flying to New York to take her to dinner. But here's what I learned about time. You can't make it up. You can't go back and attend those soccer games you missed. You can't retroactively be there for the moments that shaped who she became. Once time passes, it's gone. Forever. Emma is civil with me now. We have lunch when I visit New York. We talk on the phone every few weeks. We exchange gifts on birthdays and holidays. But we don't have what I see other fathers and daughters have. We don't have inside jokes or shared memories. We don't have that easy comfort that comes from years of actually being present in each other's lives. We're polite, pleasant, but we're not close. We'll never be close. And that's entirely my fault. 3 years ago, Emma got married. She asked me to walk her down the aisle, and I did. I wore my best suit and smiled for photos and tried not to think about all the moments that led to this one that I'd missed. At the reception, Emma gave a speech thanking everyone. She talked about her mum, about how Sarah had been there for everything, taught her to be strong, showed her what unconditional love looked like. She talked about her friends, her colleagues, her new husband's family. Then she looked at me and said, "And thank you to my father for being here today." For being here today, like I was a guest. Like showing up to her wedding was noteworthy because it was so unusual. That's what our relationship had become. She was grateful when I showed up, because the default assumption was that I wouldn't. That night, alone in my hotel room, I cried for the first time in decades. Sobbed, actually, because I'd missed it all, every moment that mattered. I'd been so focused on building something I thought was important that I'd missed watching my daughter become the person she is. And now I'm just this old man she tolerates out of obligation, not because she actually wants me in her life. I'm 76 now. I live alone in a condo by the beach. I've got more money than 10 people could spend, investments that keep growing, properties I rarely visit. I read a lot. I travel. I volunteer at a local community center, trying to give back somehow. But mostly, I sit and think about what could have been. What should have been. The life I could have had if I'd just understood earlier that success isn't measured in dollars or deals or square footage. Success is measured in relationships, in presence, in love, in whether the people who matter most actually want you around. Here's what took me 60 years to learn. Money multiplies, but time only divides. Every moment you spend away from what matters is a moment you'll never get back, and those moments add up faster than you think. One missed dinner becomes 100. One skipped bedtime story becomes 1,000. One, "Not now, honey," becomes a lifetime of distance you can never bridge. I see young people today making the same mistakes, working 70, 80-hour weeks, missing their kids' childhoods, prioritizing their careers over their marriages, and they all say the same thing. I said, just a few more years. Once I make partner, once I hit this revenue target, once I achieve this goal, then I'll focus on family. But that moment never comes, because there's always another goal, always another promotion, always another deal. The finish line keeps moving, and meanwhile, life happens without you. Your company will survive if you leave at 5. That meeting can be rescheduled. That email can wait until tomorrow. But your daughter's childhood won't wait. Her recital is tonight. His baseball game is today. Your anniversary is this weekend. And if you miss these moments, they're gone. You don't get them back. You don't get a do-over. I've got everything money can buy, and nothing that money can't. I'd trade every single penny, every property, every investment to go back and do it differently. To be there for Emma when she was 7 and excited about a drawing. To take Sarah on those vacations before she stopped asking. To understand that presence is the only gift that actually matters. Nobody at my company remembers me now. They brought in new management after the sale, and within 2 years, it was like I'd never existed. The deals I worked so hard on? Ancient history. The achievements I thought were so important. Footnotes in old business journals that nobody reads. All that work, all those sacrifices, and it amounted to nothing permanent, nothing that lasted. But Emma remembers. She remembers every absence, every broken promise, every time I chose work over her. Those memories are permanent. They shaped who she is. They defined our relationship. And I can't undo any of it. So if you're reading this and you're about to work late again, I need you to stop. Close your laptop. Go home. Have dinner with your kids. Watch that show with your spouse. Be present. Actually be there, not physically present while mentally at the office. Because 20 years from now, you won't remember what that report said, but you'll remember whether you showed up for the moments that mattered. And if you don't start showing up now, you'll end up like me, successful, wealthy, accomplished, and completely alone. Don't wait. Don't tell yourself you'll do it tomorrow. Do it today. Do it now. Because time doesn't negotiate. It just keeps moving. And one day, without warning, you'll run out of it.